Hi, my name is Andy Gillies. I am an interpreter trainer at ISIT in Paris, and I'm also coordinator of IEK's training and professional development group. And today I wanted to talk to you about intonation in simultaneous interpreting and give you a few ideas and exercises as how it can be improved. Why? Well, we often overlook this, but if you don't give the words that you say a natural intonation, you can actually communicate much less well to your listener and to other interpreters listening to you on relay. But of course, interpreting being what it is, very stressful, with a lot of intellectual effort involved, it's very easy to arrive at a very unnatural and staccato intonation. So I'm going to suggest 3 or 4 exercises today to try and remedy that situation. First though, for any of you with a sort of research bent, you might like to have a look at a very good article by Miriam Schlesinger called Intonation in the Production of and the Perception of Simultaneous Interpreting. It's essentially a study of simultaneous interpreters at work, and in her conclusions, Miriam Schlesinger suggests that on the basis of the evidence she's presented, intonation really does make a difference to how much the listener understands of what you say. Okay, so how do we improve our intonation in the booth? These exercises, by the way, are probably for fairly advanced students or even interpreters who are already working. You'd certainly want to have more or less mastered simultaneous interpreting before trying these out, so maybe a few months before your exams or in the first year after you graduate, or even later. So the first exercise that I'm going to explain I call flow, and I'm going to give you an example of what a listener might hear when they're listening to some interpreting. For example, imagine you hear the following. This position has been approved by the working party, the party members, and the parliament itself. Now, that seems very clear. But what if we compare it to what the interpreter said in a broader context and continue the sentence? This position has been approved by the working party, the party members, and the parliament itself. Will vote on it in the next couple of months. Now, do you see how you thought, from what I'd said, that 3 groups, the working party, the party members, and the parliament, had all approved this position? But actually, you thought that because I didn't pause where there should have been a pause, where there should have been a full stop. And what the interpreter ought to have said was, this position has been approved by the working party. Pause. The party members and the parliament itself will vote on the proposal in the next couple of months. So if you miss a pause, you can, certainly in a language like English, completely change the meaning that the listener understands. So what I'm going to suggest to you is very simple. If you're interpreting, record yourself, which is very easy nowadays on a smartphone, and then write a transcript of your interpreting. But don't just write out the words. Wherever there's a pause, try and represent the pause on the page with dots, and you should be able to see something like that on the screen right now. And hopefully that will push you in the direction of trying to have a slightly more natural intonation. It can be a very brutal exercise to start with, but it's extremely effective. Obviously, we aim for perfect natural intonation when we interpret, but it's very difficult. So we can only really just strive to the most natural possible. I don't think anyone has perfectly natural intonation when they're interpreting. So this exercise, you can probably continue doing it for your entire career, because we never get to perfection. Really, the pauses will want to be where the end of the sentence is and where the commas are. Okay, so that's one exercise. Let me share another one with you now, which is very simple, and it's called the Huddle. This exercise was invented by a teacher in Paris, Jesus Gettenborn. Thank you, Jesus. And it's a wonderful and very simple exercise which requires almost no equipment. Send your speaker off into the booth and have the interpreter remain in the room. And get 2 or 3 listeners to sit around the interpreter in a huddle. Have the speaker start their speech, and then the interpreter starts interpreting with the headset on, but to the 3 people who are just in front of them. And what you'll notice, hopefully, is that because the people are right in front of you, you actually start engaging with them in a much more communicative way than you do when you're doing simultaneous in a booth. When we're doing simultaneous in the booth, there's a tendency to hold your head in your hands, see it as an intellectual exercise like a crossword, rather than a communicative exercise, which interpreting should be. So you have the listener facing you, right in front of you, and that really helps create eye contact. You'll probably see that your hands move around a bit as well. Basically, you naturally enter into a really communicative way of speaking. And that's very useful because it's very easy to forget when we do simultaneous. If you have a teacher who's doing the speaking, or if you have a speaker who's very talented as a speaker, you could also get them to even introduce little hints to the interpreter by saying something like, at this stage the interpreter will be looking up and talking to his audience. So the teacher can really do a speech about the interpreting and drive the way the interpreter works. So for example, the teacher would go into the booth and say, I'm going to give you a speech today about communicating when we do simultaneous, and the interpreter is going to look at their audience, not at the floor. And when the interpreter hears that and interprets it, they will naturally look up. So you can do it on your own amongst students, or a teacher can really direct the interpreter to what they need to do by introducing almost instructions into the speech that the interpreter has to interpret and, of course, act on. Okay, the next exercise is a very similar one. It's called an inverted conference. And for this, you need 4, probably 6 people. And like the last exercise, instead of the interpreters going into the booth, the interpreters will stay in the room and the speakers will go off into the booth. Everybody will have prepared in advance a short speech, a few ideas about the same subject, and they should also be able to discuss the subject, argue backwards and forwards about the subject, have a real discussion. Everybody should be interpreting into the same language, but not necessarily from the same language. That we can be flexible about. So the interpreters are in the booth, and the speakers are in the booth, and the interpreters are in the room, and then the debate begins. Speakers speak, they react to one another, they argue, but the interpreters are sitting around a table, facing one another, having, if you like, a discussion with one another. And again, the idea of this exercise is just to remind you that interpreting is communication, it's a conversation, you're really talking to people, and it helps to look at them, to engage with them when you're interpreting and when you're speaking. Obviously a round table is more useful than a square one. If you can get a relatively small one so people are close, that's very helpful. But I really recommend this exercise and the previous one for reminding yourself that simultaneous interpreting is about communication, about talking to people, having a conversation with people. The last exercise I want to recommend is I call intonation is meaning. which is certainly the case in English. This one requires a bit more preparation, but you need a few phrases which can be spoken differently with different intonation to mean different things. So let me give you an example. The three words, thank you, Italy. Thank you, Italy. Now, depending on how that is said in English, it can mean that the chairman is thanking the Italian delegation. It can mean the chairman is thanking somebody and now inviting Italy to speak next. Or it can mean that the chairman is thanking somebody and asking whether Italy would like to speak next or not. You come up with a number of phrases like that, and then send one person into the booth with a series of phrases like this. The person in the booth then has to say the phrase with one or other type of intonation to give one or other of the different meanings that I have suggested. So, for example, thank you, Italy, or thank you, Italy. You can see the difference. Now, this may sound very mundane, but that phrase, or a very similar phrase, will come up 30 or 40 times every day in the world of interpreting. And it does make a difference whether you're thanking Italy or whether you're asking Italy if they want to take the floor. And that's just in English. Imagine you're also the relay interpreter, the pivot, for a Polish booth where the language declines. And you have to know whether Italy is being thanked or invited to speak in order to give the right case ending to the noun Italy. So it's not only good for your listener to be clear about what thank you Italy means, it will also be very helpful to some of the other booths. Another expression, let me just give you one other example. This is a great report. Now, you could say that expression to mean this is a great report, but we need a project. We need action. Or you could say this report here is a great report, but the other one we were talking about is rubbish. Alternatively, you could just be saying, well done to the rapporteur for a great report. In English, it just depends on how you say, this is a great report. This is a great report, or this is a great report. And it's going to affect your listener, and it's going to be said quite regularly. So, there you have a few exercises which I hope will help you to improve your intonation when working in simultaneous. Practice them regularly, not all the time, but if you do them once every week or two fairly regularly, I think you can hope to see improvement fairly soon. And that improvement will be a blessing for your listeners and the relay interpreters working from you. Thanks and happy practicing.